Hey there, it's Kelly O'Connell with Knockout Podcasts, and hope you're well. And I had suggested, I think on the last podcast, that I was going to do a podcast on what was the conversation like between the attorney, Steve Bertolino, and the family, which is the Laundries, which some people are calling the Dirty Laundries, but Brian Laundrie, his dad Christopher, and his mom Roberta. And so, going back over what happened, these two kids went out on the road in their young 20s, and they were taking a trip across America, and in a van, and Brian and Gabby, or Gabrielle, were traveling, and the young lady Gabby was trying to make a online journal of her travels, and she and Brian had done this before. She had moved down from Long Island to move in with Brian and his family from New York. So they were traveling around. They ran into some difficulty, and there was some tension, and we saw that in Utah that they'd had some pushing and slapping and such. And the next thing you know, Gabby is gone and missing, and unless you've been living under a rock, you realized her body was found in Wyoming. Now her boyfriend, her ex-fiance, is missing, and it seems like a lot of mistakes were made, and it seems like the police in Utah could have picked him up for spousal abuse, domestic violence. The police could have put out at least a arrest warrant for Brian for failure to contact, failure to alert to there being a significant danger, or a significant accident with Gabby dead, and also abuse of a corpse. And I was kind of stretching a little bit to find this stuff, but I knew that there were reasons that they could have put an arrest warrant out. Whether it would have stuck, to me, wasn't the issue. It was a way to put an arrest warrant on this, and I felt like they could have hit Brian with an unauthorized use of a vehicle, because the vehicle was registered to Gabby. She was the owner. So now we've got a situation where the Laundries had Brian at home, and then one day they said he had gone out to the wilderness area, and this is on the west coast of Florida, where very near where my buddy Pete lives. And Pete's one of my best friends, and he's an attorney down there, and I talked about it today, and he told me that, number one, I thought the house was about 10,000 square feet, and he said, it's about 2,000 square feet, because he had gone down to see a friend who was 2 doors down from these guys, and he said it was just an absolute circus. He said, number two, it's kind of in, I don't know if he was suggesting it was in an unincorporated area. That's kind of what I picked up from what he was saying. He was in a little bit of a rush, but he was saying that it's down south, and it's in an area that's not as highly esteemed as in my friend Pete lives in Fort Myer. So he was kind of suggesting they weren't as wealthy as I thought, but they do have a business, the Laundries do, they run a company that sells juicers. And I went to look up their site today, and it was offline. And I don't know if that means that they canceled their business, or if the company put them offline just to save from harassment, or what. But so the dad is 62, the mom is 59, if that's possible. But I had an idea that they had a lot of money. Now, Pete said the place is worth $120,000. My friend Roger, who's another great friend of mine, who lives in just, I think, above Margate, maybe not too far from Deerfield Beach, if you know East Coast Florida. And he's in the real estate market. He's excellent realtor, and he told me he thought the house would be worth maybe $300,000 to $400,000 from what he saw on from the news reports. Although he does not sell there, he sells in the Miami metropolitan area. So my theories that he could be in the Caribbean, which I already did a podcast on last time. I'll direct you back there. But the idea was they get him to the coast, and I would think that he would be driven across Florida to the East Coast, and anywhere from Palm Beach down to Miami, ripe for finding somebody with a nice boat to get out there and deliver him to the Caribbean, to Cuba, to one of these countries that I think there's 5 different island nations that allow Americans to buy citizenship. Did that happen? I have no idea, but I'm trying to think of what would I do if it was my goal to resist the authorities. Now, so far, they have resisted having Brian come in, which in itself is kind of a minor miracle. So he's out there somewhere, although some individuals are saying he committed suicide. I don't really believe that, because I thought there was a purpose to the madness. He hadn't talked to anybody, which means that someone had told him don't talk to anybody, and we'll get to that in a minute. But he did this thing that I think shows an intention to deceive, just in my impression. And it would have been saying, I'm going for a walk in this area. He went for a walk in this wilderness area, and I asked Pete, because Pete lives near there, what it's like, and he said it's like hell. He said, you don't want to be in there. He said that, you'd have to, he said you'd get so many mosquitoes walking in this area that you'd have to get a blood transfusion if you were in there for 6 hours, which made it sound pretty bad. And then he also said, all the trails are covered, they're underwater. It would just be a bad place. And he said Pete's theory was if he took a gun out there, shot himself, and he'd fall in the water, and he said the birds of prey and the alligators would have him chomp down in a few hours. I don't believe that. I'm not going for that, But okay, so here's my first question. Why did the Laundries, hire a Florida attorney? A New York attorney. It's kind of a mystery. Makes me wonder if they had a pre-existing relationship with this guy. This guy is he's in New York. I checked Florida and I checked Wyoming, and he's not licensed in either one, although he could come in Pro Hoc Beach. But let me just get to this. After Brian Laundrie left Wyoming, he was in bad shape, right? At some point, he had to have called his parents and tell them that Gabby Petito was not with him driving back. Whether he also informed them, his parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, of her death, he undoubtedly explained he had a very serious problem and didn't know what to do about it. Mr. and Mrs. Laundrie then contacted a New York lawyer, Steve Bertolino. They eventually met on Thursday, September 23rd, just a couple of days ago in Orlando, Florida, to discuss the case. Now, they first drove up there. They were being tailed by the FBI. They went into the library, a local library, and the FBI followed them in there, and they reported that they didn't look at any books, and they were in there for about a half of an hour, and then they left. They might have been just trying to figure out if they were being tailed, and then they went to a building, and I'm just assuming that Bertolino knows an attorney in Florida, or he knows somebody in Florida who allowed him to use their facility to meet. Now, this is after Brian's federal arrest warrant, which was signed on September 22nd, and the warrant was for an a use of somebody else's card, unpermissioned use of a card. And they said that he had used about $1,000 from Gabby's card on the way back. And obviously she was dead and couldn't have consented. So Brian was not reported to be present at that time. They were tailed by the FBI, and so they finally got to this building. Now, they had undoubtedly talked to Bertolino before on the phone, but why would they have to meet in person? Well, everybody wants to meet in person. It's a lot more intimate. But also, it could have been that Bertolino said, I'll charge you $5,000. I'm just kind of throwing figures out there. It doesn't mean anything, but I'll charge you $5,000 until he gets charged with a crime, and then I'm going to charge you more. The fee's going to go up. So then he's charged with a federal arrest warrant, and they had met him. I would assume they gave him a cash retainer. Could have given him a cashier's check or whatever, a bank check. But they gave him money, and then they sat down and they hammered out some of the details. So don't forget that they had picked up a topper, which is also called a slide-in camper. And you see them on pickup trucks in the back when people are putting their camper, they slide it into the bed of the truck, and it's just on top of the truck, and it kind of overhangs on the front, which is where the people usually sleep. So they got a new one of those, and they took a trip, and the neighbors had seen him, and that's what is suspected that Brian had left on this trip. It's not really clear where they went, but my speculation is that they drove him over they were gone, I think, a few days. They could have driven him over to the coast, like I said, to go to a foreign country, a foreign island country. They could have obviously driven him up somewhere else, put him on a bus, or, who knows? You can fill in the blanks on that. All right, so what was the initial discussion like? And the following is just a guess, but based on events and statements already made, it's likely close to what was covered. First, Bertolino initially informed them that whatever they told him was off the record because of attorney-client privilege. And all United States bar associations, or bars, where an attorney is licensed, to have this rule. The Florida rule is here, and here's my thinking. Right now, all of this stuff is happening in Florida. To be representing them in Florida, although he's charged out of Wyoming on this federal suit, he's under the Florida rules of professional conduct, and they're all kind of the same. So all the states' rules of professional conduct are they're based on the bar the American Bar Association's rules. So Rule 4-1.6, confidentiality of information. Consent required to reveal information. A lawyer must not reveal information relating to representation of a client except as stated in the following, unless the client gives a consent. So the situations where you would give consent are small, but you don't want a situation with the bar, with a lawyer, where you go and spill your guts to them, maybe about crimes that you've done or anything else, and then the lawyer ends up not liking you and goes and rats you out to the other party, or gets online and blogs about you, or whatever. So that the attorney-client privilege, that secret conversation, which is kind of like going to see a priest in the Catholic Church, is sacrosanct. You cannot break that. And no matter what they told Steve Bertolino, he's not allowed to legally share it. With an exception, I'll tell you about that. Second, after hearing the general nature of the situation, Bertolino undoubtedly told Brian, or through his parents, that he must not discuss the case with anyone, period, whether friends, media, or police, which he basically hasn't done. and that to direct any questions to him, the attorney. So any questions that Brian has or any conversation, he can talk to him, or if any of the media, the police call him, he can direct them to the attorney. And third, Bertolino would have informed the Laundries that Brian's entire future depended on their discipline. And you see the position that he's in right now. He hasn't admitted anything. They don't have anything on this guy. Now, when they go to find the body, when they examine it, which they've already done, they've determined that it was a homicide, then they can begin to look for evidence that would show how she died. Now, perhaps ligature, a mark from getting choked, or that she was shot, or she was smashed over the head with a rock or whatever. And then they would look for the traditional types of evidence around this death in the vehicle that would connect him to the crime. Now the next steps are more fascinating, because apparently some level of deception seems apparent with at least Brian's conduct. So he seems to be deceiving. So he goes on this walk, right? He leaves his wallet in his phone, indicating he's going to be back soon. He disappears. Number one, I don't believe he ever went over there. Number two, he leaves his phone because all this stuff track him. He's got they can track every call. They know what his number is. He gets a burner phone and brings with him the numbers that he needs. He uses the burner phone and goes out and gets a new one when he needs one. He has his own wallet, and he's got $10 or $20 or $50,000, whatever his parents could afford to give him, in that wallet, and he left, and they dropped him off somewhere. So, now here's a question people had. Did the plan to leave come from the attorney? Now, you got to be careful here, because the desire is going to be to blame the attorney for the plan. What if the plan wasn't the attorney's? What if it was Brian's? What if it was his parents? I mean, it wouldn't really be fair to blame that plan on him. And I'm not saying this as an attorney, although I might have some insight into the fact that you should avoid blaming the attorney until you know the attorney is guilty. Now, if the attorney gives them a plan to mislead the authorities, that would be illegal, right? I mean, you're not supposed to mislead the authorities. Now, the Florida, and I'm not saying that he did, by the way. And the Florida rule on this is Rule 441, truthfulness in statements to others. In the course of representing a client, a lawyer shall not knowingly make a false statement of material fact or lie to a third person, or fail to disclose a material fact to a third person when disclosure is necessary to avoid assisting a criminal or fraudulent act by a client, unless disclosure is prohibited by Rule 416. Now, I'll give you something there to chew on. I think we don't assume that the attorney gave him any illegal encouraged him to do anything illegally until we know. Generally, an attorney shouldn't aid a client in the furtherance of illegal activity. Therefore, we should not assume that Bertolino did it. Now, what if he had suggested leaving before Brian was charged? Would that be illegal? I don't think so. He might have said to him, get the heck out of town. But could the Laundries have had a hypothetical discussion on what the legal ramifications would be if Brian attempted to flee or left the country after being charged with a crime? It seems this would not be out of line and perhaps necessary to address all related issues. Now, somebody can come up to an attorney and say, with fury on their face, what would the authorities do if I killed my girlfriend? And you say, well, I mean, they're going to catch you, they're going to prosecute you, you're going to be, sent to jail or whatever. A lawyer can answer questions on things that are illegal as long as he's not encouraging illegality. So, now Bertolino and the Laundries would have certainly discussed the crimes of murder in the first and second degree, as well as manslaughter and self-defense killing. These are addressed. Well, he would have addressed the elements of these crimes and possible punishments as found in the Wyoming Code Title 6, Crimes and Offenses, Chapter 2, Offenses Against the Person, Article 1, Homicide. Well, I leave a link in this article. At some point, Bertolino would have probably talked by phone to Brian. He had to have, right? But was it a safe line? Could it have been tapped? As a represented person, the authorities should not have been able to do so. Certainly in the beginning, before Gabby was known to be missing, Brian should have been able to speak at liberty with Bertolino. Now, more questions remain than answers, but the real lesson from this entire story is that if a person runs into legal difficulty, they should immediately contact a lawyer and have a conversation regarding the legal implications. This is not to suggest that if Brian Laundrie is guilty of murder, he should get off. Quite the contrary. But remember, as United States residents, we are all innocent until proven guilty, and that legal representation is a constitutional right for everyone charged at law. So remember that. If you get in trouble, if you have any doubt about your status or your standing, I would highly encourage you to call an attorney. Now, what if you have to shell out $100? So what? $100 might save you $10,000, $100,000. Don't forget that, or your liberty. Don't forget that, my friends. So, all right, that wraps that up, and now I'm going to get into some weird news. All right, this is certainly strange here. We had a guy who was in an airplane, I think it was JetBlue, and he was on the phone, and they were within about an hour of landing, and this guy stormed the cockpit, strangles a flight attendant. Then he's restrained, and he breaks out of his restraints and keeps going. And it was a flight from Boston to San Juan. And by the way, this was September 23rd, so 2 days ago. A flight from Boston to San Juan landed Wednesday evening with one passenger restrained to a chair with multiple seatbelt extenders after an insane midair altercation. And this is from an FBI affidavit. Passenger was named Khalil Eldar, D-A-H-R. He had attempted to make a phone call near the end of the flight and became angry about the call's lack of success. 45 minutes before landing, he pulled himself out of his seat and rushed towards the cockpit, yelling in Spanish and Arabic that someone should shoot and kill him. He grappled the flight attendant, who intercepted him, punching and kicking him in the chest and strangling him with the attendant's tie. It took 6 or 7 crew members to restrain the passenger with plastic zip tie handcuffs, but Eldar somehow managed to break out of them. Another pair was used in addition to at least 4 seatbelt extenders. They finally got him restrained. All right, here's another one. Really bizarre. Some firefighters came upon a dumpster fire, the classic dumpster fire, and as they were trying to put it out, they realized when they put it out that 3 people with missing body parts were inside. Tentatively identified as 42-year-old David Luares and a couple of kids, and it's unknown who the other 2 people are. Burned, dismembered, body parts unaccounted for. Oh my God, that is so horrible. And here's another. Here's your third one for tonight. Nicolas Cage. You remember he made a movie, Leaving Las Vegas? Well, he was in Las Vegas and he had to leave a bar, and this was at Laundries. You know the famous steak seasoning Laundries bar and grill. Troubled, and this is from page 6, and this occurred September 24th, so maybe on the 23rd. Troubled Hollywood star Nicolas Cage was filmed getting thrown out of an upscale Las Vegas bar, completely drunk and rowdy, after being mistaken for a homeless man. They've got a picture of him sitting in on a couch, asleep, and he won an Oscar portrayal of an alcoholic in Leaving Las Vegas. Lowry's prime rib on Monday, and they said somebody had videotaped it. It's on YouTube if you can find it. And someone says Nicolas Cage here is a little effed up, and he's wearing leopard print pants, a black V-neck T-shirt, and sandals. And they thought he was homeless, drunk, and rowdy. To our shock, it turned out to be Nick Cage, completely smashed and getting into a bit of a fight with the staff. So he was removed, and Las Vegas is now a safer place. All right. So thank you for tuning in. It was wonderful to spend time with you. Have a great day, and I'll get this out immediately. Bon voyage. Have a wonderful day. God bless. Stay safe. Kelly. And, oh, hey, subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Thanks. Bye.